So we're going to start with the romances, because everything, did you see what Father said? He said what was taught by Louisa was taught many centuries before by Pope Leo, in a different way. It's the Spirit is working, the Spirit of Jesus. Now, John of the Cross was an inspired mystic. He was one of the giants in mystical theology, in spirituality. And do you know the story of John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila, how they met? Yeah, John of the Cross was a Carmelite in Oakham before it was reformed. And Teresa of Avila is the one who the Lord called to reform the order. And then they ended up having another order, which is called OCDS, Discalced Carmelites. Discalced means without shoes or poop. Okay. Now, John of the Cross was not satisfied with the Carmelite order. It was too lax. It wasn't focused on a prayer, So he decided to leave that order and become a Cistercian monk. Now, before he carried out his plan, he met Teresa of Avila, who said to him, John, don't leave the order, reform it. And he realized in Teresa, like a motherly figure who's guiding him. He could see our Blessed Lady working in Teresa of Avila. So he decided to follow, and he realized that it's God's will. And boy, oh boy, did he pay for it greatly, because they did not like it. They did not, people got laxed and they enjoyed the company and the food and the social event. To go back to being strict and penance doesn't sound like nice. So my gosh, they were really brutal back in these days. The poor John of the Cross, they put him in a prison in Toledo, and our brother here has been there a few months ago. Okay, now the favorite season of John of the Cross of the year was Advent. And guess what time he was in that prison? Advent. Now, he wrote this wonderful poem. He's one of the poets in Spain, the main poet. I mean, of course, religious poet he writes, but poetry in general, his poet is another level. He wrote this, so he was in this dark room where he doesn't have a pen. One of the monks felt pity on him and gave him a pen and a little bit of piece of paper. There was hardly light, so he would kneel down at the place where there's a little bit of light coming, where he could barely see, to write, right? And he was tortured every day, yeah, and given little food. And guess how long he spent in that prison? He loved Advent.
9 months.
9 months. You think the similarity between Jesus in the womb in 9 months in that dark prison of the human world in the womb of Mary and John of the Cross. Do you see the parallel? And out of this prison, this darkness, this depressing atmosphere, where they would beat him and say to him, renounce the reform. John, these were monks beating him. Monks, not soldiers. Gosh, anyway, so now, renounce that reform, John. We would be released. Imagine the pressure. He's in solitary, alone, and in that dark prison. I mean, anyone would have gone mad if that person is not close to God. Now, yet, he did not allow that suffering to become destructive, because he's close to Jesus. And he did not allow him to have hardness of heart. Because many people, when they go through such an experience, they become abusers themselves after being abused. You know, they become hard of heart. They want to take revenge. You know, it did not change the softness of his heart. They used to say Teresa of Avila was so bubbly. She was like a volcano. But John of the Cross is all inside. Yeah, all inside, you know, all inside that boiling thing, but it's all inside. So he went ahead and wrote, and what he wrote is amazing. Now the poem is very long, so I only cut down bits of it. I didn't put the whole thing because it's very long. I put the main bits. When you're going to listen to it, it will melt your heart. It will melt your heart. You think, my God, this guy must be inspired. You cannot write like this on a human level. Okay. You ready? Okay. I'm going to get very hot. Okay. Right. Okay. Now, he's a very learned man. Very learned man. Teresa of Avila did not even have a Bible. She quote things from memory. I heard at Mass this gospel passage. She was not allowed to have a Bible, not even in Latin, because she could go into error. You know, dear. Anyway, that was the thinking, right? But John of the Cross was a priest, so he had access to a Bible. He was very learned. He read the Bible inside out. Song of Songs, knew it by his heart. Passages from John's Gospel. John chapter 17 was his favorite, the priestly prayer of Jesus. Now, so he writes. So he's writing this without having any text next to him. Nothing. He's in that prison under psychological, emotional, huge stress and not eating well. And yet he writes this. In the beginning, the Word was. He lived in God and possessed in him his infinite happiness. The same Word was God, who is the beginning. He was in the beginning and had no beginning. He was himself the beginning and therefore had no beginning. Sorry. The Word is called Son. He was born of the beginning, who had always conceived him and was always conceiving him, giving of his substance always, yet always possessing it. I'll stop here. Notice what he said. Who had always conceived him and was always conceiving him. Let's go to divine will. What goes on ad intra, that work of love, the Father always conceiving the Son in the Holy Spirit, goes on ad extra. In the divine will, that conception, the Father is conceiving the Son in your soul, in the Holy Spirit, through our Blessed Mother Mary in your soul. That work of generating the life of the Son is taking place. That's why we say divine acts, divine lives. So the Father is using your soul, thoughts, words, acts as the matter, as the bread to consecrate and form his Son Jesus. He's no longer, well, not no longer, he's at Mass, he uses bread to create the divine life, the sacramental life of Jesus, which does not last forever. It lasts for as long as the person receives it, and after 15 minutes is gone. But in your soul, God the Father is not using bread. He's using your thought, your word, your acts, something that is a human, stamped with your love. He's using that as the bread and consecrating it to become his son, Jesus. And this divine life that is forming in your soul does not cease. When you go to heaven, you'll go to heaven with your Jesuses, plural, in your soul. Mind-blowing, isn't it? That is the reality. So you see, John of the Cross says, he didn't just say conceived him, he said, and always conceiving him, always conceiving him. And I want to bring to mind a passage in the volumes that is really, really amazing, which is Jesus said to Louisa, all the acts of creation, think of it, the creation of every leaf, every grain of sand, every atom in the atmosphere, every photon of light, every bird, every mammal, every human, all of these put together. Can anyone count the number of these? We're talking about a huge, close to infinity. And then take all the acts of redemption that Jesus did, every thought, every word, everything he did in redemption. And he said, when it comes to the sanctification, the number of divine lives that God wants to produce in human beings who will live in the divine will must exceed the number of all the acts of creation and redemption put together. So we are talking about uncountable number of divine lives that God the Father wants to produce in us, in those living in the divine will. And those who are in heaven, who were not able to produce divine lives, there will be those living in the divine will now and in the future that will make it up for them. That's why it's called the era of the divine will, the era of sanctification. Okay, so let's go back to the text. And thus, the glory of the Son was the Father's glory, and the Father possessed all his glory in the Son. As the lover in the beloved, each lived in the other. And the love that unites them is one with them. They are equal. So he's talking about the Spirit. Excellent as the one and the other. 3 persons and one beloved among all 3. One love in them all makes of them one lover, and the lover is the beloved in whom each one lives. For the being that the 3 possess, each of them possesses. That's the essence of God. So they each possess the same mind, the same will, the same divinity, the same Godhead. And each of them loves him who bears his being. Each one in this being, which alone unites them, binding them deeply, one beyond words. Thus, it is a boundless love that unites them. For the 3 have one love, which is their essence, and the more love is one, the more it is love. Okay. Now, we go back to Louisa. Louisa saw visions of the Blessed Trinity in the Gospel, and she saw them as like 3 children. You think, God, 3 children? But she did. I guess because he didn't want to scare her. God did not want to scare Louisa, so came as three children. And she said, it doesn't make sense. All of them weigh the same thing. 1 + 1 + 1 equal to 1, not a 3. So they all weigh the same thing, and they all are love. And she could see them all, as one, really, as one being, one essence, but yet three persons. Okay, now we go into creation. In that immense love proceeding from the two, the Father spoke words of a great affection to the Son, words of such profound delight that no one understood them. They were meant for the Son, and he alone rejoiced in them. What he heard was this. So this is the Father speaking to the Son. My Son, only your company contents me. And when something pleases me, I love that thing in you. Whoever resembles you most satisfies me most. And whoever is like you in nothing will find nothing in me. I am pleased with you alone, O life of my life. You are the light of my light. You are my wisdom, the image of my substance, in whom I'm well pleased. My Son, I will give myself to him who loves you, and I will love him with the same love I have for you, because he has loved you whom I love so. Okay. Wow. 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 And that's why the Father wants to see Jesus in each one of us. That's why he wants to conform us to Jesus, because each one of us is really an image of him. And each one of us have a divine version that Jesus made perfect. And that divine version of each one of us consists of the divine lives destined for that person. So the Father has established a number of divine laws for each creature. For our Blessed Mother, for example, who resembled Jesus most, she is the Immaculate Conception. All of these divine lives of all of us put together is in her already. So the Father wants to see Jesus in us. And Jesus is the divine life in us. Now, he goes on to say, my Son, I wish to give you a bride who will love you. Because of you, she will deserve to share our company and eat at our table the same bread I eat, that she may know the good I have in such a Son, and rejoice with me in your grace and fullness. So when he says sit at our table, eat our food, means he wants to make the bride his equal, divine, his equal. And remember what the Catechism teaches. God became man so that men became gods with a small g. It's in the Catechism. Okay. Now the response of the Son on page 4. I'm very grateful, the Son answered. I will show my brightness to the bride you give me, so that by it she may see how great my Father is, and how I have received my being from your being. I will hold her in my arms, and she will burn with your love, and with eternal delight she will exalt your goodness. Remember the arms of Jesus that we read. One arms from within, one arms from heaven, to do our acts, to do our divine acts. Let it be done then, said the Father, for your love has deserved it. And by these words, the world was created, a palace for the bride, made with great wisdom, and divided into two rooms, one above, the other below. So, talking about angels and humans. The lower was furnished with infinite variety, while the higher was made beautiful with marvelous jewels, that the bride might know the bridegroom she had. The orders of angels were placed in the higher, but humanity was given the lower place, for it was in its being a lesser thing, right? We are less than angels in intellect, in wisdom, etc. And though beings and places were divided in this way, yet all form one, who is called the bride. For love of the same bridegroom made one bride of them. Those higher ones possess the bridegroom in a gladness. I refer to the catechism here, where it talks about angels. They say they are his angels, Jesus' angels. They are his angels. The lower in hope, founded on the faith that he infused in them, telling them that one day he would exalt them and that he would lift them up from their lowliness, lowerness, so that no one could mock it anymore. For he would make himself holy like them, and he would come to them and dwell with them. And God would be man, and man would be God. And he would walk with them and eat and drink with them. And he himself would be with them continually until the consummation of this world. When joined, they would rejoice in eternal song, for he was the head of his bride, of his to whom all the members of the just would be joined, who form the body of the bride. So do you see how we are lower than them, but by him incarnating himself and becoming one of us has raised the lowest rational being God created in the universe, which us human beings have raised up to the level of God, where God the Father said they would sit at my table and eat our same food. So he raised up because he intended to work through the lowliest to bless and sustain everything in a creation, angels and everything. He would take her tenderly in his arms and there give her his love. And when they were thus one, he would lift her to the Father, where God's very joy would be her joy. For as the Father and the Son, and he who proceeds from them live in one another, so it would be with the bride. For taken wholly into God, she will live the life of God. And that's what the Catechism keep telling us. We live the life of God. What's a grace? Grace is a sharing in the life of God. We live his life. And in the divine will, you live it to the full. You live it as God intended it from the start. That's why Jesus on the volumes write the kingdom of the divine will in the midst of creature, book of heaven, then writes the call to the call to the creatures, to the order, to the place, and to the purpose for which they were created by God. That's what God intended. That was the perfect plan at the start, which Adam and Eve forfeited. But by God becoming man, a suffering savior, he obtained more glory. Okay. Now that the time had come when it would be good to ransom the bride, serving under the hard yoke of that law which Moses had given her. The father, with tender love, spoke in this way: Now you see, son, that your bride was made in your image, and so far as she's like you, she will suit you well. Yet she's different in her flesh, which your simple being does not have. In perfect love, this law holds that the lover become like the one he loves. For the greater their likeness, the greater their delight. Surely your bride's delight would greatly increase were she to see you like her in her own flesh. Incarnation, God becoming man. The son replied, My will is yours. The son replied, and my glory is that your will be mine. This is fitting, Father, what you, the Most High, say, for in this way your goodness will be more evident. Your great power will be seen, and your justice and wisdom. I will go and tell the world, spreading the word of your beauty and sweetness and of your sovereignty. I will go seek my bride and take upon myself her weariness and labors in which she suffers, so that she may have life. I will die for her, and lifting her out of that deep, I will restore her to you. And that reminds me of what Jesus said to the children in Egypt when he was a boy. It's in the volume, how he spoke with those Egyptian children who are, they come from pagan background. They don't know God, the God of Israel. Okay. And yet, how he's so embracing. And he said to Louisa in the volumes, the children were like enraptured by his beauty and his majesty. And they would just, when he goes out, they would sit and watch. They would hold, one of them will keep watching. Is he leaving the house? And when they see him coming out of the house, you go to the rest. Jesus is out of the house, and they all come after him. So they would keep a watch, constant watch. And Jesus tell Louisa, Jesus the boy, speaking with the boys, and he said to them, do you know what my father wants? He wants to be known as your God, to be known as your father. He doesn't live just in the heavens, that he created everything for you. He lives in your souls. This is Jesus speaking to children who don't know even the God of Israel. So love him. Love him. Love will make him happy. Love him. Love will make him happy. This is Jesus' first sermon as a boy in Egypt to the Egyptian children. So read it, it's in the volumes. What you could do is you could have the collection of all the volumes in PDF on your computer and just quickly do search Egypt. It will come few entries and then you will get into it very quickly. That is one way to do it. And you know, remember when I told you about that image of the worm who wants to take the king out? So you could quickly search for worm, and then if you are searching from the beginning, it would come first because it's in volume 1. So this is just one way to quickly go to the text. Use the power of the computers that we have for your advantage. Yeah. All right, back to the text. Okay. Then he called the archangel Gabriel and sent him to the Virgin Mary, at whose consent the mystery was wrought, in whom the Trinity clothed the Word with the flesh. And though three work this, it is wrought in the one. And the Word lived incarnate in the womb of Mary. And he who had only a father now had a mother too, the mother of God, Mary. But she was not like others who conceived by man. From her own flesh, he received his flesh. So he is called Son of God and of man. As the Catechism say, he's truly God and truly man, but without sin. Truly man as the spiritualized man, as the divinized man, not as the sinful man. In the volumes, Jesus keeps saying to Louisa, you must get rid of being human and you become divine. He doesn't say it like this, get rid, but paraphrasing. But there's a lot of text that says you must become divine. The human must disappear. What he's talking about, not the divinize the humanity, the spiritualize the humanity of the divine will. He's talking about the sinful humanity, the sinful. So that's why you need theology when you read the volumes as well. That's why the volumes are built on the scriptures, catechism, the faith, mystical theology is built on everything before it. So you know, that's why you need to understand the theology as well. And we need the priests to help us understand the volumes correctly. Imagine someone who not grounded in the faith and they would read that text. You would go into error thinking that I must become divine. I'm not a human anymore, you know. Yes. So you would misunderstand them. Or imagine someone reading the text like when Jesus says, these divine lives, you will have Jesus within you. And in a passage, Jesus is trying to emphasize that. He says, so I don't need a priest to consecrate because I have you. He's not saying I'm not going to have a priest. He's saying that we will have a priest in the new era, in the era of divine will, that will give the sacrament. We'll still need faith and will still encourage to go and receive Jesus in the Eucharist. Yeah, but he's speaking about, he's emphasizing the aspect of the divine lives, about the consecration of your human acts that becomes Jesus's. Yeah. So when you read the volumes, it's like the Bible. Jesus says, if your arm causes you to sin, cut it off. If your eyes cause you to sin, take it off. He's not speaking literally. So you need to see the overall picture to understand. But that's Jesus' way of speaking. You know, he emphasizes something here, emphasizes another thing. So you need to really see the overall picture. Okay. So we're into the last paragraph now. When the time had come for him to be born, he went forth like the bridegroom from his bridal chamber, embracing his bride, holding her in his arms, whom the gracious mother laid in a manger among some animals that were there at the time. Men sang songs and angels' melodies celebrating the marriage of the two, such as these. But God there cried and moaned, and these tears were jewels the bride brought to the wedding. The mother gazed in sheer wonder on such an exchange. In God, man's weeping, and in man, gladness, to the one and the other things usually so strange. That's where the poem ends. Amazing, isn't it? I feel like clapping for John of the Cross. Really amazing. 1577, he wrote that in that dark prison. Like, I would think somebody is relaxed with a cup of coffee, have lots of volumes and text next to him, and a computer where he could edit. And what they won't come up with this. This is someone in a prison with a little light to just see, barely see to write, and under enormous psychological, mental stress writing this. My gosh. And when he says the two become one, the wedding, he's speaking from experience. This is a saint who had mystical marriage. And this is a saint who must have experienced acts in the divine world, because he described them. What Jesus said is, Louisa was the first one to live in the divine world. That means continuity 24/7. He didn't say nobody before Louisa could have experienced some acts in the divine world. He didn't say that. So, for somebody to write the living flame, to say one act of a soul done by that soul is more important than all the acts of the entire life, and more and more and more, because God is working in her. She's doing it with God. I mean, if someone writes something like that, that is divine will, isn't it? So, this is a saint who lived that mystical marriage. And when he talks about the bride, he's talking about his own soul too, as well as the collective soul of the church and the angels and everything God creates. Astounding. Really astounding. Now, we put this next to the 9 months of Jesus in Mary's womb.